the ship that blew up the world economy. Dear friends, I want to tell you the story of a certain ship. The ship is called Tuzka. It's an Iranian container ship, a completely unremarkable cargo vessel, well, one of thousands that sail the waters of the Persian Gulf every day. But it was this ship that made headlines around the world on April 19th. It was because of it that oil prices jumped by almost 7%. It was because of it that there was a truce between the United States of America and Iran. Well, the truce that was supposed to open the road to peace is now hanging by a thread. Sources: CBS News, CNN, Reuters, NPR, Al Jazeera, Military.com, Washington Post. And the data on oil and gasoline prices as of April 19, 1926. Another interesting topic for us. This is why, in a country on the European continent, people vote not for freedom, but for security. And from their point of view, for a full belly. Of course, I'm talking about Bulgaria. On April 19, 1926, Bulgaria, a NATO and EU country, held parliamentary elections. And they voted in such a way that today Brussels is holding its head in its hands. The Progressive Bulgaria Party won. They love the word progressive, liberal, advanced, and so on. Former President Rumen Radev's party received 44.7%, with a turnout of over 50%. This is one of the strongest results for a single party in an entire generation. The closest rival was the Gerb party of former Prime Minister Borisov, with 13%. So, Radev could actually rule alone. But we'll get to that a bit later. Let's start with what concerns everyone, the military actions. And also, for purely practical reasons, how long will gasoline remain expensive and how expensive will it get? So Iran, the strait, the ship, oil, and our future, all of it is intertwined. I want to tell you what happened. I want to explain why this matters not only for Iran, not only for America, but for each of us, including the person who filled up their gas tank this morning for $4.05 a gallon. I want to look at this story through the lens of what we call the science of freedom. Because, as always, behind the news headlines are eternal principles. Principles that have been described by people I've quoted many times before. Bastiat, Mises, Hayek, Thomas Paine, and who recently summarized his remarkable ideas in the online book Capitalism, the Liberal Revolution. That is, well, Capitalism, the Liberal Revolution. Lawyer and student of Andrew Galambos, Frederick Marx, my friend. So let's get started. Part 1. What actually happened in the Gulf of Oman. April 19th. Well, Sunday. Early morning Tehran time in the waters of the Gulf of Oman, a few miles from the entrance to the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranian vessel Tuzka appears early. The vessel is sailing under the Iranian flag. According to the U.S. Department of the Treasury, this ship has been under American sanctions for many years. Why does Washington believe it is being used to circumvent restrictions on the export of Iranian goods? Heading towards Tuzka is the American destroyer USS Spruance. Spruance. This is a fourth-generation Arleigh Burke-class ship with a displacement of about 10,000 tons, carrying dozens of Tomahawk cruise missiles and Aegis anti-ship missiles on board. In general, it's one of the most advanced modern warships on planet Earth. According to the U.S. Central Command, also known as CENTCOM, the American military spent 6 hours sending warnings to the Tuzka. Guys, stop, change your course, turn around. You're violating the U.S. declared naval blockade, but the Iranian crew did not respond. I think there was a clear order, and the vessel kept heading toward the Iranian ports. In other words, the ship's captain received an order from the Iranian leadership to test how far the Americans would go in stopping Iranian ships. And for 6 hours, it seemed like a lot of noise about nothing. But after 6 hours, Spruance opened fire. Not with missiles, but with precise fire at the engine room. The destroyer's command ordered the Iranian crew to immediately leave the engine compartment. The ship was stopped, and water started pouring in through the breach. American Marines lined up along the deck. The vessel is now under the control of the U.S. Navy.
On Sunday, the United States disabled an Iranian cargo ship that tried to break through our blockade. The ship was fired upon multiple times, completely destroying its engine room. Then U.S. Marines stormed the ship, capturing it during a helicopter operation. It is now fully under U.S. control. The center is publishing footage of the operation stating U.S. Marines leave the amphibious assault ship USS Tripoli by helicopter, flying over the Arabian Sea to board and seize the MV Tusco. On April 15, the Marines boarded the Iranian vessel after the destroyer USS Spruance disabled the Tusco as the commercial ship ignored repeated warnings from U.S. forces for 6 hours. We warned them. We told them, don't try to break the blockade. They didn't want to listen, and this is what it led to. Yes, let's watch the team's video footage. Here they are. We're working in night vision mode. I'll pause it now. You can see helicopters hovering over the deck of the ship. Night vision is on. Night vision goggles are actively being used. Several helicopters are in the air for this operation.
President Trump wrote about this on Truth Social. I'll paraphrase, we gave them a fair warning. The Iranian team refused to listen. Our ship stopped them. We just punched a hole in the engine room. End quote. This is the first case since the blockade began on April 13, when the Americans used force against an Iranian civilian vessel. This is a civilian vessel. Before that, during the week of the blockade, the U.S. forced 23 ships heading to Iranian ports to turn back. But without shooting, without any holes, without boarding. Tusca changed everything, because now it's not just a blockade on paper. This is active armed interception. That's what Reuters reported. The first direct use of force as part of the U.S. declared naval blockade of Iran.
Motor vessel Tusca. Motor vessel Tusca.
The ship Tusca. The ship Tusca.
Vessel, leave the engine room. Leave the engine room. We are ready to open fire to disable you. So they are trying to make it stop, but it doesn't want to stop at all. And then the first shots are fired. The first shot, the second shot. 3 shots. 3 shots. That disabled the ship, and then the Marines boarded it. After the U.S. Marine Corps and Navy captured this vessel, it is reported that the Iranian state news agency Tasnim, which is affiliated with the IRGC, claims that Iranian forces attacked several American warships with drones in response to today's attack on the Iranian vessel Tusca, sailing under the Iranian flag in the Gulf of Oman. So, it says here, the military forces of the American terrorists attacked the Iranian container ship called Tusca, which was traveling from China to Iran in the Gulf of Oman a few hours ago. After the Americans attacked the ship, Iranian forces also attacked several American warships with drones. So we actually don't know whether Iran's claim that they hit our ships with drones or tried to attack them with a swarm of drones is accurate or not. But the Iranians say that they really did launch the attack. Our ships are well protected. I don't want anyone to panic. Pause. Was worried. Our Navy ships have a wide range of defensive measures. The drones won't be able to break through the multi-layered defense systems of the U.S. Navy fleet.
Part 2. How did we get to this point? On February 28, 1926, the American-Iranian War began. By April 9, the parties, with Pakistan acting as a mediator, reached a ceasefire. It seemed like a respite, a chance to negotiate. But there was one knot that no one could untie. That was the Hormuz Strait. The Hormuz Strait is a narrow waterway between Iran and Oman. About 20% of all global oil trade passes through it, as has been mentioned many times, and about 20% of the world's liquefied natural gas as well. As economists like to say, this is the narrowest bottleneck of the global economy. From the very beginning of the war, Iran has periodically closed this strait. This is its main tool of pressure. Want to fight with us? Go ahead. But 5 minutes after the war starts, your oil prices will double. On April 13, the U.S. announced a countermeasure, a naval blockade of Iranian ports. So, under the blockade, any ship going to or from Iran cannot pass through the strait. According to Al Jazeera's calculations, a month before this blockade, Iran earned almost $5 billion from oil exports. Now it's zero. Literally zero. The oil isn't going out, the money isn't coming in, and for Iran, half of the budget comes from oil revenues. So we're not just talking about pressure, but about financial strangulation in real time. And then on Saturday, April 18th, Iran makes an unexpected move. They announce that the strait is open again. Tankers can go. Wall Street breathes a sigh of relief. Oil drops to its lowest level since March 10th. And then, literally on the same day, Iranian boats open fire on 2 Indian vessels.
Индийским судам.
The Indian Ministry of Foreign Affairs summons the Iranian ambassador in New Delhi for an explanation. The Indians are in a state of mild shock. I'll explain why. By Sunday, it becomes clear the opening of the strait was just a formality. Iran continues to control who passes through and who doesn't. And then the Americans decide to move from words to action. Well, and then Tusk appears. Part 3.
Экономический.
Economic earthquake. What happens in the global markets, let's say, 12 hours after the Americans landed and took Tusk? Brent is the North Sea benchmark crude oil, which in fact is what almost the entire world uses as a reference. It jumps by about 7% and reaches $96.88 per barrel. The American WTI grade is also up 7%. At the beginning of February, before the war, Brent was about 65. An increase of more than 50% in a month and a half, ladies and gentlemen. An increase of more than 50% in a month and a half. On Sunday, not a single tanker passed through the Strait of Hormuz. Hundreds of ships, according to Lloyd's estimates. Over 300 are waiting at both ends of the strait until they can move on. This is a floating traffic jam on a global scale. This is a floating traffic jam on a global scale. And now, something that concerns every American. The average price of gasoline in the U.S. reached $4.05 per gallon on Sunday. Back in January, it was $2.92. Yes, that's the average, of course. In California, it was higher even back then, and so on. The Minister of Economy, the Minister of Energy, Chris Wright, said in an interview that prices below $3 per gallon probably will not return until next year. The price will come back. To which Trump publicly responded, "The minister is wrong." Now, let me ask you to think about this and remember good old Frédéric Bastiat. Bastiat, a 19th century French economist, wrote a remarkable essay called That Which Is Seen and That Which Is Not Seen. His main idea is, every economic action has obvious visible consequences, and there are invisible ones that are no less real. What do we see? We see an American destroyer punching a hole in an Iranian ship. This is power, this is victory, this is us not letting Iran sell oil, which means the mullah will soon have no money for war. Okay. That's what is visible. But what isn't visible? What isn't visible is that an elderly woman in the UAE now pays $20 more for a tank of gas. What isn't visible is that a farmer in Kansas pays more for fertilizer because ammonia also goes through Hormuz. What isn't visible is that a transportation company in Texas is forced to raise delivery rates, and groceries in the store will become more expensive. Bastiat would explain to us, for example, that a military blockade never affects only the one it's aimed at. It affects all participants in the global market, at least that much. All participants in the global market, because the market is not a chessboard where you can remove one piece and nothing will change. The market is interwoven. If we pull on one thread, the whole fabric crumples. What exactly are the ships doing? The Indian warships themselves are not entering the Strait of Hormuz, but that's a political decision. They're not entering for now. After a coordination with Iran, they provide radio escort and navigational assistance to their ships inside the strait, and when their ships exit the strait, their destroyers and frigates meet them and escort them through the Gulf of Oman to the North Arabian Sea. Well, it's like in the past, for example, when caravans, let's say camel caravans or ships, were accompanied by some kind of Mamluk guard or something like that, So initially, 22 Indian ships with more than 600 sailors were stuck in the Persian Gulf. 10 ships have been taken out and the remaining 12, well, 2 are being escorted now and 10 are still left. As a result of direct negotiations between India and Iran, on March 26, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi announced that ships from 5 countries, China, Russia, India, Iraq, and Pakistan, would be allowed to pass through the strait. This agreement worked until about April 18 when it was broken by gunfire at the Sanmar Aranold. That was the name of the ship that was fired upon. India is rapidly increasing its oil purchases from Russia, taking advantage of discounts after the sanctions, as well as from the US and Africa, specifically Angola and Nigeria, and some gas is being redirected from the US and Australia. Well, it's clear who's making money from this, right? It's a long restructuring process, but it's already underway. Now let's talk about Tehran's reaction to all of this. The Iranian Foreign Ministry called the seizure of Tusk piracy, using that exact word, piracy. So, firing at ships from boats isn't piracy, but firing at ships from ships is already considered piracy. The Joint Military Command of Iran promised a retaliatory strike and stated that the United States violated the ceasefire, but they did not violate it. The Iranian Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated that there is no trust in Washington, like there used to be, but now there isn't anymore. The most important thing, Iran has questioned its participation in the negotiations in Islamabad. Let me remind you of the context. On Monday, Vice President J.D. Vance, Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, and Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner are flying to the capital of Pakistan for the second round of negotiations. The first round was on April 11th seas. Overall, although it was declared unsuccessful there, it was considered productive because they discussed a 3-page memorandum there about ending the war, in exchange for which the U.S. was ready to unfreeze, I think, $20 billion of Iranian assets, if I'm not mistaken. And Iran refused to give up its stockpiles of enriched uranium. That's why Trump actually said that, so to speak, they agreed to give us radioactive dust. But then the whole Turkey situation started, so taking advantage of the situation with Turkey, Tehran announced through its news agency IRNA that as of today, there are no plans to participate in the negotiations. We have no idea whatsoever who is making these statements. The same people who are participating in the negotiations, or maybe another faction. The reason supposedly is Washington's excessive demands, unrealistic expectations, and constant changes in position. Our position has been the same before the war, during the war, and now. Repeated contradictions and the ongoing naval blockade. Let's throw out everything except the last 3 words. The ongoing naval blockade. Pakistan, nevertheless, got ready, so to speak. They know their own people and say, no, but they go anyway, usually. So,
Islamabad сегодня развернута.
Thousands of additional security personnel. I think half the city's residents are security personnel. A number of roads have been blocked. The American advance team is already in the city. Pakistan is very interested and is acting as a mediator. This country is closely connected to Iran by a shared border and trade flow. It absolutely does not need a regional conflict, not at all. Pakistan spent months preparing this round of negotiations, and now a single shot at Tuskegee engine room could ruin everything. What has been done since January? Of course, everyone understands that the order for Tuskegee not to stop or turn around, no matter what the Americans do, was given specifically either to prove that the Americans have no teeth, that their blockade means nothing, or to provoke exactly the reaction that is happening now. Part 6. Trump's ultimatum. How could we do without it? Right, isn't that so? So Donald James, he just can't help but issue an ultimatum. Donald Trump that same Sunday evening stated on True Social that if Iran doesn't agree to the proposed deal, then, well, to quote the gist, the United States will knock out, no, not their teeth, every power plant and every bridge in Iran. Every power plant and every bridge in Iran. They put women on the bridges. They didn't put men there because, well, women are expendable. Who needs them, right? But men are valuable, so they put women on all the bridges, like, if you're going to bomb our bridges, then to hell with it, bomb our women too. There. That's, to put it mildly, not diplomatic language about bombing, right? That's a direct threat of large-scale bombing of civilian infrastructure. Besides that, Trump set a deadline. The ceasefire ends on Wednesday evening. So how much time do we have left? 24 to 36 hours, right? Yes, Washington time. According to him, an extension is extremely unlikely. Well, I mean, it's likely. But it's extremely unlikely, but it's likely. Without a signed deal, that is, Tehran has about, well, I don't know, 36 hours, yeah, to decide whether to sign or get bombed again. Well, here we are back where we started 2 weeks ago. America has to make a decision, start Armageddon in Iran or delay it again. Iran's first Vice President Mohammad Reza Aref responded on social media, gave a strong response to Trump. The security of the strait is not free. This is for everyone who writes, don't convert everything to dollars. We won't convert everything to dollars, we'll convert it to yuan. So the choice is simple. Either a free oil market for everyone or significant costs for everyone. This is essentially a threat to keep Hormuz blocked for as long as necessary, Frederick Marx, a student of Andrew Galambos, whom I have mentioned many times in his book Capitalism, The Liberal Revolution, that is, Capitalism. The Liberal Revolution is fully available online in English, but there are always various translators out there. It can also be translated into Russian by chapter. He states the main question of the science of freedom as, how can we get rid of bad governments without violence? Galambos proposes an answer. Transfer the functions of protecting life and property from the political sphere to the sphere of voluntary competing services, that is, replace the state's coercive apparatus with the market. Now imagine for a second. I understand this is a thought experiment, but so to speak, not an immediate plan. Imagine if the Strait of Hormuz was guarded not by a navy or the fleets of rival states, but by a private insurance company working under contract with shipping lines from all countries. Such a company has no political interest, zero. It only has an economic interest in keeping the strait open to make money. Its profit depends on how many ships have passed, not on how many have been sunk. It has no enemies or allies, it has clients and risks. In a world where protection is provided by the state, the strait is closed every time politicians' ambitions flare up. In a world where protection is provided by proprietary services, that is, commercial ones, the strait remains open because closing it is not profitable. That's it. No participants benefit or profit from it. This is what Galambos and Marx, my comrade of the slaughterhouse who is Carlo Marlo, and then there's Frederick Fred, call a revolution. Not a revolution with barricades, but a revolution in the understanding of how we organize the protection of life, liberty, and property. Well, that's the main takeaway of the day from all of this. That's what I want you to take with you after this video, my friends. One Tusco ship with a damaged engine in the Oman Bay, one shot, one order to a single commander, and the effect is a 7% increase in the global oil price. That's a hell of a lot of money. Failed negotiations, tens of millions of people who will pay more for gas, food, and heating tomorrow, the threat of bombings, the threat of retaliation. I'm not saying whether it shouldn't have been done or should have been done. It's bad. Who started it? No one started it. I'm only talking about one thing. As soon as something like this happens, we all suffer. This is not an accident, it's a structure. It's what inevitably happens when the protection of life and property is in the hands of political states. States, according to Galambos' definition, are organizations that claim the right to use coercion. Well, whoever within the state has the weapons, the means, and the power to coerce, they use it. And when such states collide, everyone else suffers, always, without exception. I'm not trying, really. I'm not trying to say this one is to blame or that one is to blame. I'm not even trying to find who's to blame. I'm trying to show you a law of nature. So, does it mean that the people who gave the orders are to blame? Those who ordered the ship not to stop despite the threats, or those who ordered to stop all traffic through the strait, or the blockade of the blockade? Or is it those specific people who gave the order to shoot? Or the captain who made the demands over there? Maybe all of them together. Or maybe all of them together. Or maybe each of them individually. The solution is not about choosing between good and bad states. The solution is something completely different. It's about gradually, step by step, transferring the functions of protection into the sphere of voluntary, competitive market exchange, just as Bastiat described it, just as Mises justified it, just as Hayek predicted it, just as Galambos, Nelson, and now Fred Marx encouraged it. Until we do this, there will be other Tuskies. There will be other straits, there will be other shots, and these shots will be paid for by pensioners in Los Angeles and taxi drivers in New York. This is not an abstraction. This is that very gasoline. $4.05 per gallon. Well, all right. Let's move on to Bulgaria, because there are also some interesting things there. I would put it this way: Bulgaria is voting for Moscow. We love this tyrant. We want to cooperate with him and live by his rules. Why doesn't democracy in a NATO country guarantee freedom? That's the million-dollar question. So who did the Bulgarians vote for? Well, Radev. However, they're against sanctions on Russia, against military aid to Ukraine, and against the 10-year defense agreement with Ukraine that was signed in March, therefore resuming the flow of Russian gas and oil to Europe, and against the Eurozone. He's an open Eurosceptic. Well, by the way, so am I, and a pro-Russian politician, and that's where we differ. And this person was elected by the people in a NATO country. The people, a free, democratic people with no election fraud. The European Council has already congratulated him, and Putin, I'm sure, congratulated him too, but even more sincerely. And this is where the main point begins. Since childhood, we've been told a simple formula: democracy equals freedom, elections equal freedom, the will of the people equals freedom. Well, nothing could be further from the truth, of course. And we've talked about this many times, but we're talking about Bulgaria, right? Bulgaria overturns this formula in one fell swoop. The country is free. It democratically elected a person who wants to reopen the gates toward the largest unfree empire of the modern era, at least in Europe, if not the world. How is this possible? And do you remember the man named Adolf Hitler? There in Germany, there were also completely free elections, and in the next elections, 90% of Germans shouted, "Hooray!" and threw their hats in the air. The answer to this question was given long before 1926 by thinkers whom we regularly discuss with you. And today I want to show that what is happening in Sofia is not an anomaly, not a coincidence, and not a Bulgarian peculiarity. It is a systemic consequence. A consequence of the fact that democracy without limits on state power does not guarantee freedom. Never. And nowhere. But, so to speak, just as the road to hell is paved with good intentions, the road to slavery is paved with votes. Friedrich von Hayek, Nobel Prize laureate, in The Road to Serfdom. This was right before the end of the Great Patriotic War in Russia. That is, in World War II, it was probably around 1944. He formulated the main idea: democracy is a procedure, a way to choose rulers. The procedure itself doesn't protect against anything. The majority can vote for freedom, or it can vote for slavery, for Churchill, or for Chavez. If the state doesn't have clearly defined, constitutionally limited boundaries, no voting will stop the moment when half the population starts voting to take away property from the other half and naturally to distribute it to themselves, or for returning the country to the orbit of the empire it recently left. We will vote in lockstep. Bulgaria is a perfect textbook example. Perfect. 8 elections in 5 years, corruption, high prices, wars next door. People are promised stability, cheap gas, a return to normal life. The procedure is flawless, but the result is a move away from freedom toward Moscow, toward the Kremlin. The state committee, or whatever it's called today, voting doesn't override economic laws after all. Ludwig von Mises, who was Hayek's teacher, warned that you can vote for anything you want, but you can't vote against the laws of economics. Radziev promises a free flow of Russian gas, but what will he get in return? Independence. A tool for blackmail, political subordination. You open one door for the Kremlin, another one closes for freedom of speech, for an independent court, for private property. This is a law, not an opinion. You can't vote it away. More precisely, you can't outvote it. This is an example of how democracy devours itself. Allow me to quote my, once again, good friend and remarkable philosopher, Frederick Fred, in his book, which I have already quoted, Capitalism, the Liberal Revolution, Chapter 11, which is called Political Democracy in America. The epigraph is the famous phrase by Alexis de Tocqueville, the French traveler in America in the 1830s. Democracy can exist only until the voters discover that they can vote for themselves. Generous gifts from the public treasury. That's the amusing conclusion made by Alexis. Remember this phrase. This is a diagnosis. As soon as the majority discovers that by voting they can redistribute the property, let's say, of some minority in their favor, the majority votes and takes from the minority. Yes, democracy begins to devour the very freedom that allows it to exist. So Fred Marx, in that same chapter, makes a fundamental distinction that he borrowed from Galambos. He distinguishes between two words that people often confuse in everyday speech: state and government. The state is an organization that protects property by forcing you to pay for its service. You may not have requested this service, but you can't do anything about it. And a government is any organization that protects property by contract, which you can opt out of at any time. Thank you very much. I don't need your insurance. I'll go to another insurance company. Thank you very much. I don't need a mortgage from your company. I got one from another. I'll pay you off now and you can go your own way. So, a lock on the door is a government, and an insurance company is also a government. But the tax authority, which comes in and takes your money under the threat of prison, that's exactly what the state is. Do you feel the difference? Political democracy is a mechanism. I really dislike political democracy, in which the state remains coercive, but now it is governed through majority voting. Well, before it was a minority, there was a king, a czar, a shah, someone else, a padishah, yes, and he had a couple dozen people in his divan. The divan is the cabinet of ministers. Or it's the dictatorship of the proletariat, or not. Even so, it's the dictatorship of the minority and the dictatorship of the majority. Those who are governed, who have things taken away from them, who are put in prison if they don't do something the authorities want. Yes, it's not very pleasant for that minority, so to speak. So this mechanism doesn't limit coercion, but legitimizes it. So if you go out with a club, so to speak, onto the main road and stop a carriage, then you're a robber and they'll hunt you down afterwards. But if you issue an order, a decree, a law, vote by majority, and then go to that same carriage, so to speak, unhitch the horses, take the diamonds, and even kick someone along the way, then you've done it completely legally. It was legitimate. The majority gets a moral license to act boldly. Anything to the minority as long as you have 50% plus one vote. And that's it. Do whatever you want. If you have democracy, of course, political democracy. There's another kind of democracy. There's market democracy, but that's a separate topic. 10 people gathered, and 6 of them democratically voted to take away the property of the remaining 4. This is our wonderful democracy. Now let's talk about Bulgaria and Hungary. There's an interesting movement happening there, in both places. Exactly a week ago in Hungary, the voters ousted Orban, who had ruled for 16 years, and a centrist won, at least that's how he presents himself, Peter Magyar. Europe rejoiced, democracy won, and today in Bulgaria, democracy also won. But with the exact opposite result, a pro-Russian, anti-European politician came to power, the same procedure. Two opposite results, or, as they say in Odessa, two big differences. This is the proof. The procedure itself is morally neutral. It doesn't protect freedom, democracy, the West, or the East. It only protects what the majority wants at the moment. For example, to hang someone, right? It's the same thing. Lynch law, that's pure democracy. But freedom is something else. Freedom, according to the definition by Galambos and Fred Marx, is a state in which each individual has 100%, right? Specific control over their own property. Property includes life, thoughts, patents, inventions, the furniture you bought, money, something someone gave you as a gift, and something you exchanged. Everything you possess, from your own life to your own ideas and so on, and things, what is called property, 100% belongs to you. It's not 51%, it's 100%. Not by majority decision, 100%. And only a limited, constitutionally bound government, or even a completely voluntary one, can protect this freedom. That means a proprietary government, that is, well, a commercial government, which we talked about several times in previous videos. So, ladies and gentlemen, let's quickly move toward the conclusion. Next time someone tells you that democracy automatically means freedom, remember, Bulgaria, democracy. April 19, 2026.
Good. Вспомните так?
Remember Tocqueville. For some reason, I always want to say Torqueville. I don't remember why. I think there was someone named Torqueville, maybe related to Russia. Never mind. Democracy exists as long as voters haven't learned to vote themselves gifts from the public treasury. Well, it's public, it belongs to no one, so I can just raise my hand, vote, and get it. And remember Fred Marx with his distinction between the state and the government state. Freedom is not voting, but freedom is something that voting cannot and has no right to take away. This is the eternal principle that the American founding fathers wrote into the Declaration of Independence and tried to protect as inalienable rights, and which Bulgaria, like many other European democracies, essentially does not have. Until next time, take care of yourselves. Think for yourself. If you think with someone else's head, it turns out, and everyone will see, that you don't need your own head at all. This might lead some people to certain conclusions. There. Remember, democracy is a tool, freedom is the goal. Freedom is the goal. Don't confuse one with the other. Until next time, hopefully very soon.